I decided to write the letter because when I saw the news headlines, the breaking news coming in of what was happening in Itaewon as a crush disaster, it reminded me of my own experience of disaster. And I knew that the way these things tend to unfold in the days and weeks after for those affected is very hard. So I wanted to send my condolences, first of all, and also to share my own experience only if it would help other people.
You mentioned about the disaster that you went through. It's 34 years ago, but I know that it's not always easy to talk about it again. And so we really appreciate your sharing your experience. In the letter, you talk about step by step what experience you go through. Can you tell us a little bit about that?
I think when you're involved in a disaster where, you know, some people around you lived and some people died, it's very, very hard to initially even make sense of it, even to realize that it's real, because you're in such a shock. And that lasts for many, many days, and indeed can ripple across the months and years. What we tend to do in shock is to feel quite numb, to not really be able to take it in. And what helps to make it real, and is the process of starting to be able to deal with it, is to make sense of it by having facts and information, having truthful answers, an account of what has happened is part of dealing with trauma. Because what happens is then you may have all sorts of normal reactions, shock, disbelief, a sense of denial, very strong emotional reactions that can affect your body, hard to sleep, hard to eat, and your mind, feeling very angry, feeling very frightened, thinking it might happen again. And of course, survivor guilt.
Can you tell us a little bit about what survivor's guilt is? And
survivor guilt is very, very painful. I would say it's one of the hardest things I've had to cope with after surviving my disaster. It's important to understand what it is, and it manifests in many different ways. Sometimes people can feel literally, I should have been able to stop this. I should have helped somebody else. I had that. When the facts go against that. So understanding what has happened and why, and how you, for example, you couldn't help anybody else because you were struggling yourself. It's not selfish. That kind of help, sometimes delivered by a professional, but sometimes just by other people, is very helpful. And knowing that it manifests in different ways. So there may be other people who find that they're just very angry all the time, or very frightened all the time. And that again can be part of this survivor guilt, because unconsciously you feel like your actions can prevent things happening. So you retreat from the world, or you fight the world. And survivor guilt, lastly, can be felt not just by those there, but many of my friends and family members and people who weren't there on the day, but could have been, feel they should have been. Maybe they decided at the last minute not to go to the football match or to the celebration in Itaewon. They may suffer from survivor guilt too. So it can have a very big ripple effect on many people. But there are ways to address it by understanding it, talking about it, and knowing that when you're involved in this kind of tragedy, it isn't necessarily your fault. It's not your fault. And that's something I wanted to say very much in my letter. It's not your fault. Don't blame yourself.
As a media company, that this time we tried to be careful. So we were kind of blurring the pictures or trying to decide what to not air. But when it was just happening, that is hard for us to even recognize what's happening. From the media company's point of view, what do you think we should be more careful of?
That's a really excellent question, and I'm grateful for the sensitivity in your questions and your approach. I want to emphasize that. It's sometimes a rare and special thing. I think it's helpful to think of different stages of a disaster, because as an incident unfolds, it can be very helpful that the media are covering it and bringing live pictures. But now that I work as a specialist with those organisations who respond to disasters, the emergency services and others, I can tell you that they will often use media images as part of their making sense of the situation as an incident unfolds, even in their control rooms, etc. So there is a role for the media to be sharing information early and thoroughly for the benefit of responders, as well as those trying to find out desperately news and information about what has happened. In terms of the sensitivity at the time and certainly afterwards, it's very good to hear that you blur images. And when you think about it, it makes sense to think of that ahead. So there is already a plan to say, if we show images, we have a standard or a code that says, for example, we won't show people who are struggling or who have died out of respect, etc. So that can instantly be put into place by the editors, etc. And then when you show images or cover a story later, it's helpful to be aware that every time, not only the word associated with the disaster, like Itaewon, Crush, Hillsborough, Stampede, these words and images that often flash up on the television will take people like me and others straight back to the disaster. So an example, in relation to the Hillsborough disaster, many media companies in the UK have now decided they will not show images of the crush, which was filmed live. When they cover a story or a related story, they will show the memorial, or they'll show images of those who died, if the families have agreed to that, positive family images that have been shared.
One of the issues that also we were talking about is it all right to call it Itaewon disaster, or should we call it October 29 disaster? Is there any opinion related to that?
This is another excellent question. I think the most relevant takeaway from this question is having the question, because the answer will always depend. As you found yourself, there will be different opinions about the correct name and many different meanings attached to it. For example, with Itaewon, I understand the business community was significantly affected afterwards, as was, for example, when there's as is the case, when there's a disaster at a private venue, like we had with the Manchester Arena terror attack. So in those cases, the name of a place or the name of a private venue may very much not wish for the name to be associated with tragedy, because it has an impact on business and also on the community, the business community. So that's one of the considerations. One thing that might help is that sometimes what happens, and the media may not be in control of this, the community often have responsibility or take responsibility for naming a tragedy. But sometimes in terms of healing, a brand or a logo kind of emerges. For example, after the Manchester Arena terror attack, the hashtag Manchester Together was formed. Or sometimes with other disasters, there are hashtags and, Grenfell recovers, or that kind of branding of the incident or association with it can make a difference. I would say out of all of this and many other of the questions you would have about how the media handles a disaster, a key thing over time is to keep asking these questions and to consult with all of those affected, bereaved people, survivors, the community, because you'll find that the answer may be many and varied, and you'll work through that. But whatever you decide to call an event, or how to show it, or how to report on it, will have an impact on those different communities. And so consulting and being prepared to be responsive and responsible is really the takeaway here.
In your article, you talk about especially the care at the first stage, early stage is very important. But in this case, I think the press tried to be very careful of it, but they had a lot of people on social media who was criticizing them for being there. So they had a lot of families who didn't really want to show that their family was affected from it. In that case, I feel like you won't get the support or the careness in the early stage as much as you mentioned. And in that case, what can we do?
Other people can be very, very cruel. And sadly, we see this here in the UK and in other tragedies across the world. Social media, for example, seems to generate lots of cruel commentary. Knowing that is important because then you can protect yourself from it. It's important to know there is that choice. And that's one of the things I wrote about in some of the advice I gave. I think that, again, a common wish for those who are bereaved and survivors is some people want to grieve publicly and find great help and comfort in having tributes, a funeral where people are able to see it if they give permission through the media, etc. And others wish to grieve privately. The key takeaway here is to respect that and for those affected to have informed choices. That's a key phrase I often use, informed choice. So being warned and informed, for example, and consulted, for example, by the media about things like whether you want the funeral to be covered, how you would wish your loved one to be spoken about, do you have a family photo you wish to share? And if families decide they don't want to share any of that, to respect that and keep away. And I think in all of this, the key thing is going to sound quite basic, but kindness, respect, and the opportunity for people to access support privately or from the community when they wish to. So some people in my disaster too didn't want to think about it or talk about it. They felt huge shame, which was survivor guilt. It was not their fault, as it wasn't for Itaewon. It was not the fault of the individuals there, but they and we dealt with it by not talking about it. Now, 30 years later, some survivors from my disaster feel they can talk and they want support. So when people are ready, if they are ready to talk, have comfort and support from others, it's important that it's available to them then.
One worry that usually as a reporter that we have is that we would like to ask them about like what happened and to make it for them to have more sense, but for the viewers to also understand what happened. But at the same time, we're worried asking them to talk about this. Wouldn't it be too difficult for them, or are we harming them again? How do you feel about that?
Good question. It is a dilemma. And so it's important to look at how, when, where and why individuals may wish to speak, and to always give them that informed choice, and to make the opportunity to tell your story a protected and safe one. So, for example, how? Well, asking people to speak, but without giving them advance notice or advance warning. I've sometimes been rung up by a journalist who would say, "What do you think about the news that's come out about your disaster today?" before I even know of it. So giving due warning, thinking about the environment and making it safe, like, for example, not doing it when other people are around, giving warning about what the questions will be, etc. When and why, explaining what the purpose of covering a story is, how you're going to cover it. The other thing that's important here is that for some people affected by disaster, talking about it and telling your story can be cathartic. It can be very helpful. And so it's not always that speaking of it will bring it back. It's probably always there. So it's honouring that choice and giving people the opportunity. And one more thing, Chong-A, which is sometimes the same people get asked again and again to tell their story because they wish for it. But it isn't always helpful for them. And so as a responsible journalist, you may see that the effect of telling the most horrific details, even though the interviewee has said, yes, please keep coming and talking to me, is actually damaging them or even damaging the viewers. And therefore, responsibility is about making the decision yourself to say, I'm just not going to ask them to do that anymore, because what it can do, telling your story, is keep you in the same place, even if you're not aware of it. So again, I think the question that you ask is the one that journalists can take away. You know, why are we asking? How are we asking? Do they wish for it? Do we wish for it? Is it helpful? Is it safe, etc.?
As a survivor of the disaster, what did help you the most?
Trying to sum up 34 years. What helps me the most, and I say helps because I'm still living with it, is understanding. People understanding or wanting to understand what has happened, listening, allowing me to tell my story when I wish to or need to, making sense of my own emotions and reactions when I have them, which is what led me to study disasters and trauma, and being able to do something about it, that efficacy again, which is why I changed my career and started to focus on disaster management. So I now train people who plan and respond to disasters. And lastly, paying it forward. That's why I wrote the letter to Itaewon. That's why I've been so privileged and grateful to meet members of the 416 Foundation, several families and families from other tragedies in Korea. I went to Korea a few years ago, and the bond that you feel with people who've been through other disasters is very hard to put into words. So all of these things help me. And talking to you helps me because you're interested to understand and you want to help other people.
Right now, our survivors of the Itaewon is still trying to fight to figure out what really happened. Is there anything you would like to tell the family of the disaster?
I am so sorry that you are still suffering. I understand how painful it can be, and that 100 days is just like day one. I would say that the thing, in our disaster too, it took a long time. What has been helpful, and I hope may help you or them, is to not forget to keep talking about it, to surround yourself with those precious individuals who will listen, who will stand with you as you campaign or call for answers which you deserve to have. Connect with those reporters and others who will work with you to tell the truth and establish the truth, and know that you're not alone, that there are many people, they may not speak directly to you, but who will be there for you. It may take time, but you must have hope, because often change, although it takes time, does come about. And it comes about because of people who've been through it, who have such an important perspective and fight that can be embraced and brought to bear in this.